Skating games were a powerhouse of the early 2000s, and I'm sure a lot of us can say that we grew up with them. Especially around that time period, they were everywhere, and none more so apparent than the Skate franchise. Held in such a high appeal for the perfect mix between arcadey fun and realistic physics, they released 3 consecutive bangers within 3 years of each other. These games were basically a household name for those who owned a PS3 or Xbox 360, but looking back on them almost 15 years later, were they really that realistic? And how well do they hold up against modern skating games? Before this video begins, however, I would like to say that I am not a skater. That's right, I'm a poser. I have been interested but never actually tried to properly learn. Perhaps you could become a channel member so that I can afford a new board. Early access, a shout out at the end of my videos, and a bunch of other perks doesn't sound like a bad idea, but thankfully we're not looking at actual skateboards today. We're looking at video games, so here I feel like I've actually got some knowledge in this field of work. But enough blabbering, let's go back to where it all started, with the original Skate. The first thing you might notice is just how much style this game bleeds out from it. With the scrapbooky ripped magazine artwork of its menus, to the early 2000s, late 90s colours and filters that you would see in those old skating videos, to the fisheye lens type camera that you would also see, and I mean, the style meter is a literal film reel. Everything from the fonts to the music just screams stylish and unique, and this game wants you to know what it is. It's a gritty, anarchist, and artistic game about skating, which is where this game is at its greatest. Unlike the games that came before it where you would just move left or right and tap 4 buttons when you hit a ramp, to hit a kickflip or a grind or something, in Skate, you simulate the motion you would need to do with the right joystick. So to do a kickflip, you need to pull it down and then flick it up and to the side, or slightly pull down to hit a manual, or when on a ramp, use the triggers to hold your board for grab tricks. This sort of control system was both satisfying and accurate, and added a realistic aspect that wasn't seen in the previously arcadey games, while also just being great for how well it rewarded skill. Super easy to learn but hard to master is the perfect description for this, as you couldn't just press random buttons or hold your joystick forward for it to all work out. You had to push your feet manually to pick up momentum and manually pump when going up a slope and such, and depending on how well you do these acts, determined on how well you were rewarded with speed and height, to do even crazier tricks. And because of the joystick controls, there are a crazy amount of combinations that you can do with this. The trick combos and momentum, however, were grounded within the game's physics engine. The smooth and satisfying controls were mashed with the unfortunately sluggy and delicate movement. But rather than this holding the game back and creating a frustratingly slow feeling of motion, it makes everything you do feel more deliberate. Like I've said, in the older games they would just hand you speed and you just had to press buttons to do tricks and hopefully land them. But in Skate, you had to plan out your lines. Would you fit in an extra push for a little more speed, but not have enough time to get a good pump in for this ramp? Or do I have enough time to commit to a grab trick here, or will I just fall on my face? This made perfecting your lines and learning new tricks fun, because when you do get a good thing going and it looks great, it's the most satisfying thing in the world. But let's take a look at the little things. Most importantly, the world. There are many things that make the game world feel alive, in a sense. When skating around, NPCs will move out of the way if you get too close to them, and will also just talk to you or shout random things to you as cars driving around will slam into you on the road. NPC skaters also go around doing their own thing, and the first time I played a skate game when I was younger, I was wondering whether these were real players or not. In many spots around the map, there are these no skate zones, and there'll be a security guard there who tries to push you around. It even starts playing some music like a minigame. It's really fun. Now, even with how little these additions are, they make a big impact on making the world feel more alive and realistic. The movement, physics, and world of Skate 1 already sets out a great example for the rest to follow, and thankfully, its sequel expands pretty much everything before it. Straight off the bat, Skate 2 adds a very welcome feature, with that being the ability to get off your board and walk around on foot, which was never really a problem in the first game, but having this almost extra dimension being added to the movement makes traversing around even smoother. It certainly makes getting upstairs easier, rather than just having ramps everywhere in the first game. Skate 2 also expands the trick list, adding new tricks such as hand plants, foot plants, hippie jumping, and a bunch that just fills out the options that you have. Other than just better animations and basic optimizations of mechanics and systems, there isn't a whole lot of outstanding new additions other than those mentioned previously, as Skate 1 was already really well set out from the start. The graphics aren't too much better either since there's only a 2-year difference in the games, and the only noticeable changes with the UI is a much more saturated filter over everything and a clearer fisheye camera overlay. I do think a lot of the unique style that the first game had, especially with its menus and UI, have been dropped slightly for a more generic looking art style. The foundations and themes are still present everywhere. The map is also arguably more iconic than Skate 1, no matter how memorable the first one was. But I mean, Mega Compound, Old Town, these places have been basically imprinted into my brain at this point. The world of Skate 2 is something I can say feels much more alive than Skate 1. Specific things about the first game just felt empty. The city felt way bigger and the NPCs were uncanny, but something about Skate 2 feels more alive. The NPC density is larger, NPC skaters are much more apparent, the AI feels like it's gotten a way bigger upgrade, and they added the ability to hold the back of cars and skate away with the added momentum. I mean, come on. Oh, and of course the no skate zones are still present, bitch ass security. Skate 2 just feels like a more refined version of the original Skate, expanding on most of the features and systems while added much needed mechanics and other additions. I would probably say Skate 2 is my favourite Skate game. At least, if Skate 3 didn't exist. Skate 3 is so iconic that it isn't even a skating game. This is the skating game. Controls are smoother, map more iconic. This game is the culmination of everything the 2 games before it set. Let's just start with the controls. You can still feel some sort of semblance from the more realistic and deliberate movement from before, but it feels much snappier and precise now. Even walking on foot is so much easier to control and is much quicker to move around. Going back to Skate 2 after playing Skate 3, yeah, the on-foot walking isn't that great. It felt so sluggish and inaccurate, so this is a great evolution. As for tricks, there once again is a bunch more added to fill in every situation or line you would want to hit, along with a lot being tied into your on-foot walking, which creates much smoother transitions between the 2 modes of transport, and also creates some fun glitches. It really feels like they sacrificed a lot of the realistic mechanics and systems for a more arcadey feel while keeping the same controls. But when it comes to its world, I mean, it's just great. Everybody knows Super Ultra Mega Park, everyone knows Carverton Quarry, and everyone has heard of the Double Bridge Gap, even if they can't do it. And once again, the world still feels alive, but this time there wasn't much of an improvement. But for 2010, there's not much you could improve on other than just better animations and slight AI changes, which is what's been done, and the world still feels just as alive as it should be, although there is a lot missing in this game. Like Skate 2, a lot of the style and uniqueness has been sucked out of it again, making the menus look more generic and the fonts more modernized, which is fine, but I really enjoyed a lot of the aura that Skate 1 had. Also, no skate zones are gone this time, which is actually a big shame and it will be missed. And I don't know how, but skating around many of the parks, especially the residential areas and the city, I get the same empty feeling that Skate 1 had. But moving on from that, like I mentioned before, due to the new physics system, a lot of glitches has been introduced, and well, it's a console game from 2010. It's expected. And these ones are great. Primarily the backwards man. That's some speed. Alright guys, here's a tutorial for how to do the backwards man in Skate 3 for the Xbox 360. Get off your board, set a marker and reset. Throw your board with right trigger, jump with X, and at the peak of your jump, right as you're about to go back down, tap the right button. Don't hold, just a little love tap, like you're floating with it. And very quickly after that, press Y again and voila. Now it takes a while to get the timing right, but once you've got it down, it's like riding a bike. You never forget. Now you might see that and go, oh well, that isn't realistic, and sure. But I say, let's compare it to a game that is much less realistic than Skate. Tony Hawk's American Wasteland was the first skating game that I was exposed to when I was younger, and I had a lot of fun playing it. You might say comparing these games isn't fair since they're a whole console generation apart, but fuck you. 2005 wasn't even that far back, and I don't want to download anything else to play, so here we are. Compared to the skate games, the controls are completely different. Rather than pushing your feet yourself to gain speed, you just move automatically or hold the A button to move faster and then release to do an ollie. You kickflip or heel flip with the X button, grab tricks with the B button, and initiate a grind or do ramp tricks with the Y button. This simplifies a lot of tricks, which makes it easier to hit something crazy, but it also limits the number of tricks that you can do and the creativity you have with your lines. And with the game moving you automatically, it just bounces you off any wall that you hit, which makes it almost impossible to fall off your board if you just don't press anything. So yeah, controls are basically inexistent, and with the way it's set up with the point systems, hitting a good line doesn't feel almost as much satisfying as skate. And so, most of the satisfaction from playing this game in free roam comes from just hitting high scores with your points combos. But it's interesting because while this game does have a shallow control system, it does also have a lot of working parts that really are just great. First of all, this game also lets you off your board and it feels smooth just running around. I know this probably wasn't the first Tony Hawk game or skating game in general to do it, but like I said, I ain't downloading another game to play. I do understand that the slow and inconsistent off-board mechanic in Skate 2 was intentional to be more realistic, but American Wasteland just feels smoother and nicer. It barely interrupts your speed when transitioning, even though you feel like a chipmunk with the weird speed of this game's animations. Also, day and night cycle, even Skate 3 doesn't have this stuff, so this being in the game with the infinite grinds is a thumbs up. NPCs are also around, although much more limited than the skate counterparts. They do still pack a punch. NPC skaters also around doing their own thing with, again, very limited and repetitive AI. And there are some things that aren't really part of the realism argument that I just find cool, are the semi-secret areas that you can find around the map and freaking out, which is just straight hilarious. And also the amount of skating aura that this game has. Like Skate 1, having an obvious identity and personality just boosts the game up to a higher level. Yeah, this game is very clearly meant to be a very arcadey and unrealistic game. I mean, you can grind the top of moving cars, but it is very fun. It doesn't reward you for skill too much, but it does punish you when button mashing, which does force you to figure out the best combo of buttons for the highest points. And I was supposed to record only about 20 minutes of footage for one of my sessions, and ended up staying for over an hour, which does say something. And let me think of a nice segue into the next game. If you think that's unrealistic, then let's talk about realistics now. Session is the most realistic skating game I have ever played, in many ways. Mostly for the skating, of course. Here, instead of mashing different buttons in American Wasteland or using the single joystick like in Skate, you use both joysticks to simulate the actions you would use for each foot. Right stick is for the back foot and the left stick is for the front foot. This does feel pretty weird to get the hang of, but when you do, it is a really satisfying control system. I do want to say though, although the foundations are great and they've added a lot of great things, the game still feels very unfinished and unpolished, which is especially seen in the lackluster trick selection and the generic maps. But it's still a really great experience. Yes, unfortunately, because only basic tricks are present, you won't be doing Christ airs or 720 judos in this game. Most of all you're able to do is kickflips, shove-its, and maybe a 180 ollie if you're lucky. The craziest thing you probably do is a kickflip coming off of a nose grind, but that adds to the realism of this game, especially when added with the game's physics. Session is tough, like really tough. I thought Skate was easy to learn but hard to master. This game is almost impossible to learn straight up. Because of the physics, you don't have your magnetic rails to grind, no walls made of bouncy castles. Even hitting the curb too hard will send you flying. But going back to the controls, you need to pull down with your right stick to squat and then pull up with your left stick to ollie while pulling back down to land. Kickflipping is pulling down with the right joystick and flicking with the left. To grind, you need to make sure you hit on the right angle and pull down with either joystick for a heel or nose slide, or hold down with both for a board slide. When you are static and practicing slowly, these tricks aren't hard and really are satisfying to get good at. But when needing to pull them off in quick succession, it's very difficult since even the smallest mistake will send you into a ragdoll. This very tough and harsh system, however, feels great to practice because of how well it rewards it. It's like practicing a Dark Souls boss. Yes, I just related skating to Dark Souls. But it's true though, talent doesn't exist. Talent is skill and practice makes skill. This is probably the most realistic part of the game, because the rest of it isn't really. Going back to the world, the maps are very generic. You have Street 1, Street 2, Building 1, Building 2, or Skate Park 1 and Skate Park 2. There's no Super Ultra Mega Park or Mega Compound, which is good. It grounds it more in reality, but a little more variety in the future would be great. Imagine we could skate in front of the Eiffel Tower, or even a water park would be cool to see. Oh shit. Well damn. But moving on, would you look at that? Day and night cycle. How thoughtful. And customizable. NPCs are also weird, no wonder why they're in the experimental settings. They just walk forward in some direction and stand still sometimes. They do dodge out of your way, but seemingly only after you've hit them, which is like unstoppable force meets immovable object. When on your board, you are the former, but when on foot, you're the latter. Actually, speaking of on foot, it's in this game, and is actually a great feeling movement system, although a little inconsistent. Jumping is strange to say the very least, almost floaty, and the camera sensitivity is funky, but it works. It really feels like they've tried to perfect the base mechanics and systems which all work perfectly, but with it, it leaves many of the other game's features in the dust. But as a skating simulation, it ticks all of the boxes as a realistic experience. I mean, you can land primo for crying out loud. But now then, we've seen the realistic, we've seen the unrealistic, but which is better? It's the more arcadey games. Look, I would just rather be able to pull quad kickflips out of my ass whenever I want, rather than have to read up the instructions to hit a pop shove it. And it's just plain fun, which is what it should be. These are video games. If I wanted a realistic skating experience, I would just skate in real life. And actually, halfway through working on this video, I actually started practicing. And although I snapped this shitty old board trying for an ollie, it's fixed up with enough layers of duct tape and makeshift splints that I can still practice 180s in little bits. But I do have a new board coming soon, which I'm excited to try out, and so, in conclusion, get a hobby. Just a few words. This video is very different to my other ones, but I feel like there will be a lot of random just gaming topic videos on my channel that I just want to make, and this was one of them. Like I said, I'm no skater, so if I got some stuff wrong or I don't know what I'm talking about, that's probably why. There is a lot of stuff I missed talking about from these games, and my analysis was very surface level, but I just want to talk about the stuff that I found important in a skating game. And I could have easily mentioned Riders Republic Skateboard DLC or Tony Hawk Underground and other skating games, but I just used what I have. I love all of the skate games, and I just really wanted to talk about them, so that's why we're here. Again, check out my channel membership if you want to support me, a bunch of great perks, and it's very cheap. I also livestream fairly regularly on this channel and on Twitch, so come say hi sometime. Also, go watch my second channel, where I post monthly about games that I played. Go watch my other videos if you haven't, like this one that's going to be on the right of your screen.